did. I think it's subconscious because you went like this.
You can get one cheap for like 50 grand.
Where we're on.
$315,000 that you wanted to look at.
No.
Oh, yeah, 26.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 9th Abington Finance Committee meeting. We are rapidly approaching town meeting and are looking to try to finalize recommendations for the warrant tonight. So we do have a lot of business. We're going to get right to it. Starting off the agenda tonight, I'm going to ask the town manager and Sue Moquin also to come up. I believe we have updated warrant articles. No.
Yep.
These are updated as recently as this morning after the public hearing by the planning board
Still feel warm.
and edits recommended by town council as a result of that.
Thank you.
Did you get a copy, sir? Why don't you have that, just to be absolutely certain?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference between this and the previous copy that we have are the planning and zoning board articles only, no other changes. Excellent. So, with that said, we would like to invite Wayne Smith up to talk about the petitions.
And all the others, planning zoning are.
Yes. Wayne, how are you tonight?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming. Good to see you. Do you want to take us through the various articles?
I don't, do you want most of the money articles, or do you want all the zoning articles and everything? I can do the whole thing.
I think all is better, yes.
Okay.
Is a good way to put it. One of the questions that people always have is even the ones that don't seem to have financial impact could potentially have financial impact. So going through them all is a good thing.
I'm not quite sure that this matches up with this new one. Perhaps we can. The first thing I think that comes under us is the, and maybe you want to go through yours as you're doing, is the revolving fund.
Yes.
Which, I might miss something, but if so, if you just interrupt me, please.
Can you just give
So
us
the revolving fund is Article 4.
Page 4, which is 60,000. That's funds that come into us from the developer, and that money is put into a fund, and that money is paid out to our engineer. The funds that we raise for many things just go into the general fund, such as Form As and all that. Although in some cases, the engineer will look at that. Usually we have enough to cover it out of this fund here. So that's what that is.
Excellent.
If you have any questions, just stop me. But
Yep.
then, on page 6, it may not be the same, but,
I believe on our new one, it is page 7. I think we're starting at Article 13.
Article 11 might have some.
Oh, 11.
What is select number?
Actually, it's nothing that, we haven't taken this up at our planning board, I agree
Zoning.
with it.
Yes.
But it does relate to the zoning rules and regulations which are here.
Is this 13?
11.
11.
And just so you know, we did talk with the town manager on this at a previous meeting. For anyone who was not here at that meeting, this is to do a thorough review of the zoning bylaws, to like a holistic review, which we have not done in a
And I'm not
while.
speaking for the board in this case. I don't particularly see the need of it. $75,000, to me, it's 75,000 here and 10,000 there, and the next thing you're talking about real money. And quite frankly, if there are items on there, for instance, a signed bylaw, which there was, people had questions with it, mostly definitions and things like that, and the town meeting voted to have a committee. So 2 years later, which is this year, they come up with their rules and regulations, and that's part of that. In addition to that, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but there's another article in here. It's Article 13, which is on the master plan. Yeah. So, want me to go to that?
Sure.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And it's actually going to be through the chair to the town manager, related to the Board of Selectmen article that you just indicated. So Rick, I don't know if you're able to hear this particular discussion with regards to Article 11, the $75,000 request for professional services to assist the town with review and updating of the town's zoning bylaws. That seems to have a specific agenda insofar as scope. So what is the scope and what is the purpose of said review, if you will? There's an outcome that's desired, so what is the intended outcome? So is it a comparison to other communities and how they have similarly situated zoning? Is it?
The Board of Selectmen had asked for that to be included in the warrant. The intent would be to put out an RFP for an independent consultant to assist with a study committee similar to that of the recent sign bylaw committee, who didn't have a consultant, but they utilized the services of town council on a case-by-case basis as they needed assistance. The point would be to work with the committee to review the entirety of the existing zoning bylaws, to essentially update them. They haven't been updated in a holistic way for at least a dozen years or so, so I've been told by the members of the Board of Selectmen. I believe it was, I don't say Mr. Burbine was the one who raised this as a possibility before he left office. That would be the intent for a hybrid of what, members of the planning board, zoning board of appeals, members, a member of the Board of Selectmen, to work with a third-party consultant over a period of time, perhaps whether it's a year or so, to go through the entirety of the existing zoning bylaws and bring them up to date through a study process. That would be the intent.
Sure. Thank you. Second prong of the question. Are you don't speak on behalf of the planning board, but as a member of the planning board and a person who's been elected to the planning board, well, since I've been into the town, so are the zoning bylaws, are they out of whack with regards to what our master plan is, so to speak?
Not in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and this was not a request of the planning board. This was a request of the Board of Selectmen.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. I followed your advice from last week. Ask the treasurer collector about home values, and I'll ask the experts about planning board stuff, so you're my expert.
Do you happen to know how often other communities update their do a study like this?
No, I don't, but I can tell you this, that it's constantly updated. Almost every year we have articles that come before the town meeting, since as long as I've been on the planning board. So it's constantly changing, zoning's changing, things are changing. We've had 3 master plans, which we'll get into later, but which are supposed to be done once every 10 years. Many towns don't do it, but supposedly to get grants, you need to have the master plan. And
So even if we update it, even if we put the money in and do this study, a year later, we could still have changes because of things that change
Absolutely.
laws and,
or we see something else that perhaps someone
you
likes.
didn't realize
likes.
or.
Right now, we have, and we've had discussion on it. Even though we have rules, zoning board rules and regulations, anyone can go to the zoning board of appeals and have something changed. One of the things that we've had a lot of discussion on recently, and is sort of goes back and forth is on highway commercial, we shouldn't allow apartments on it or condominiums on it. And in some people's opinion, because we really need more businesses now, and on the major highways, we'd be much better off having businesses on it than residences on it. And so it's a special permit, but in general, the zoning board of appeals gives them the right to put a condominium in or a housing complex. In some people's minds, that's probably not beneficial to the town. Other people disagree. So those are the things that we keep coming up, and that was going to be in our, and it's been taken out. But constantly there are people who want to change it. The same thing with signs. I mean, feather signs and things like that, and I would agree, we don't need to have them. And the other thing, in the sign bylaw, most of the problems we ran into with the sign bylaw was that we were not enforcing our sign bylaw as it existed. For instance, one of the things that we have in our bylaws, we've had in there for a number of years, is not to have internally lit signs, but they're all over town, and in most cases, they're fine. Now, whether or not they went before the zoning board of appeals to get a variance, I really don't know in most cases. And a couple of years ago, the zoning board of appeals asked us to take over the electronic signs, which we did. And so, and there's, now, this, we'll get into it later, but I mean, that bylaw, that they want to change that so that it comes out of the planning board's jurisdiction. All of the signs go back to the zoning board of appeals. So whether or not you have someone come in and do the bylaws all over again, doesn't make much difference. If someone decides in town that they want to, either by petition or by the selectman or by the building inspector, or we'll get into it later, but on swimming pools, he does not particularly like the definition of that. Also on carports, you can put a carport in and it's fine as long as you don't have walls. So we're changing that. So it's constantly changing because people come up with new ideas.
So, town manager.
Again, to the extent that I know the Board of Selectmen's concern was that seemingly it seemed to be a little bit haphazard how, particularly with all the petition articles this year, how this came, a lot of these came about. And I think the attitude is that in contrast to the sign bylaw effort, that it makes sense to have more of a forward-thinking professional look at zoning bylaws as a whole versus the way the bylaws have come across over the last several years, this year being, again, I think the word was haphazard. It's not my word, that's the word, I think the word was used at a selectmen's meeting. So, again, I'm sure to the extent that members of the board wish to speak to this in town meeting, they can do that. So that's how it came about. The other thing I would say is that the dollar number is, I had done some surveys, one of a couple of my peers that I worked with over the years in the planning profession, and depending on the full scope of services, somewhere anywhere between 60,000 and 100,000 was a reasonable ballpark. So it's not as if we had done obviously we didn't have time to do a formal RFP to get some sense of. So that is an estimate of what the scope of services would likely be in the range of if and when the time comes that an appropriate committee is set up to pursue this project, if indeed it's funded by the town.
And just as a general point for the board, it almost seems as though if we believe in Article 11, then we should motion to pass over all the other planning articles, because we're going to have a comprehensive review of all the zoning bylaws, and that will have all these updates that potentially could be asked later. So you're going to cause a lot of confusion. And I'm not suggesting that, by the way. I'm not in favor of Article 11. That's my personal opinion. I think it's not necessarily money smartly spent. But it's hard to reconcile because you have a lot of planning board items that are coming from a good place. So the challenge then just comes, are you going to spend good money, waste a lot of time, confuse a lot of folks, and possibly create confusion? So that's just my last commentary on that. Second to last commentary.
Right.
I think I probably already know the answer to this, but all the petitions were brought by like one person, right?
No.
All the ones we saw? No?
There's several that were by
There-
one person, and then there's other,
So my last question is, can he pay for it? Or is that impossible? I'm only asking because if you want to do something, I mean, I'm new, so I kind of don't know.
Anybody can bring a petition, any
Right.
group of 10 people in town
Yep.
can bring a petition.
Sure.
And when they do bring a petition, it has to be heard by the planning board. And then it has to go forward, whether or not the planning board wants it or not. We did have an instance where the planning board actually had an article last year, and the selectmen refused to put it on the town warrant. So that can happen. So sometimes when someone wants an article, if the planning board tomorrow definitely wanted to have an article put on the town warrant, and the selectmen didn't want it put on the town warrant, they could refuse to do that. If it's done by the citizen, no one can refuse to put it on the town warrant. So that can become a problem at some point.
Thank you.
Any further questions on Article 11 specifically before we move on? All right, so 13.
So 13, on the master plan, we're supposed to have a master plan done once every 10 years. Quite a few towns, we found out, when we really researched this, hadn't had it done, some for 30 years now. But they tell me it affects grant money and everything else. We've had one every 10 years. I think the first one we had cost us around like $10,000. And perhaps the second one was like 20. And then the third one we had done by a fellow that was very knowledgeable and was able to do it. We had him as a town planner who was with, had run Old County Planning Council for a number of years. So that saved us some money. So we're due to have it again done this year. And we looked around for bids and everything else, and believe it or not, it was $150,000 for the same plan. And there are other towns that have spent 130 a couple of years ago and things like that. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we have the last three of them that are fairly well done. In looking at it, I said to Bruce Hughes, who was with Old County Planning Council, and he got the figures and everything. And I said, this is crazy. And we really, it's not my money, but it's the town's money. I think you won't. I'm talking to the But, so anyway, he put me in contact with the Conway School, which is out in Northampton. And they have done this for some towns. They don't include the whole thing, but they have a lot of it, with the exception of the economic development part of it, and we could get someone else to do that. So this article is in for $20,000, and I am sure it will cover the law, and we'll have a decent master plan. And I think, and the interesting part of it, and I've been out to the school and talked with them out there, and I'm convinced that they'll give us something decent. The interesting thing, these are all graduate students, college graduates, and getting another degree, and they will work on that project along with the professors overseeing it. You get some pretty good value. I know in other organizations I'm involved with, they've used the University of Bridgewater University, and have come up with some great stuff for very little money with some great expertise, and that's my recommendation. And the board's totally behind it.
Questions? All right, Article 14.
The next one is 14 in marijuana, which is, you say, why do we get a new,
Yeah.
it's always something, we didn't have.
There's
this
always
3 or 4
something
years
else,
ago.
yep.
We have the medical marijuana on the books, but in this case, and as you find, as you go through this thing, there are a whole mess of things in there. And there's problems in the fact that if you prohibit it, well, maybe if we start out with the first one. That was to extend a temporary moratorium to reading this, yeah, to June
Yes, a year.
2019. That's one alternative, because a lot of the stuff hasn't been totally done by the Commonwealth of Mass, but, you know, who knows where. So that's what that's all about. That's the first article.
Which ties directly into the second article.
Please?
Which ties directly into Article 15.
Right.
Because you need one and the other, because you can't have 15 without the vote of the town
Right.
at an election.
Right.
So you need to have the moratorium in place so you could actually get that bylaw
So you
passed.
can at least wait, but, and then, so 15, as you can see, it's not allowed in any district, the way it's written. That's, you see all the districts on the top, and then below it, you see, no. So that means they can still go before the zoning board of appeals and prove a hardship, I suppose, and get one put in. I'm not quite sure how that would work, but, so that's what, basically, it's saying. And the planning board has a problem with this in the fact that there is some disagreement on the board, and I understand it also, is that the planning board, from the sounds of things, the way most of the members talk, is they are against, well, I'm not even sure that's true. I think some people would say it's okay to have stores in Abington doing this, and some people would say no. But there's a difference between retailers and having a related business, such as growing the marijuana. They don't have an objection to. I think that's generally the way it is. They look at the revenue from it and so forth, and the testing facility, they don't have any problem with that. So they're against the retail stores, but they're not. And the problem with the retail stores, and we've had hearings on all of this, obviously. And we originally had a zone, you can put in the zoning for town meeting, you can have an overlay district, which we had it in. And originally we had it on Route 123, from Rockland to Brockton. And to put that in for the town meeting. And that way, if someone says, no, I don't want it from this area to this area, or this area to that area, we can exempt it. But, so, it didn't have to go the whole length. And we had a lot of people from the Brockton side that were at the meeting, and they objected to it tremendously. And we looked at the whole thing, and then some people didn't want it in the transit-oriented district, where the T comes in. And then some people didn't want it in the residential zone, which is a small zone on 123 as you go to the center of town. So in any case, we really looked the thing over, and we decided that we weren't going to have it on 123 at all. And we came up with another area. I'm probably getting into some other article here. I'm probably off base here. But so we have it at the Weymouth side of the town, in what they call the technical business zone. So.
Like where the old movie theater was? Drive-in,
Yeah,
the old
so-
drive-in?
so- Yes, right. So
where is that?
Over to Route 18.
So beyond,
It goes, it's beyond the old Benedetti's Sorrel.
Yeah.
It's just a little further north.
18.
On 18.
Right next to your house.
As a point of
Where, like
order,
at the Christmas place?
that was Article 17.
No, I mean, really, like, what is there? Christmas place?
No, you're okay.
That's
It's-
okay.
They're all interrelated, so I think
Yes.
it's perfectly fine.
Yep. No, that's all
So
right.
that's what, so this one
So we
really,
can watch it.
and that's from the Board of Selectmen. We all have to have the hearing on all the zoning articles, but it's presented by the Board of Selectmen. Then
16.
let's see, 16.
So that would be like for marijuana, like the growing, any of that would be on that strip of 18?
Yes.
Okay,
right,
or like
yes.
the lab that they do, like the testing or any, that would be where it would be?
Right.
Not necessarily a retail shop there?
No,
Okay.
well,
Depending what passes,
right.
yeah. And then if it's just like the growing, can the town still collect the 3% tax
Yes.
from it? Okay, so if we don't have a retail store, we can still get the tax benefit from that? Okay,
my understanding is, we'll know when they change.
okay.
So
I'm sorry, but I apologize. That's not how it reads at all, actually. It's a direct prohibition for all aspects, cultivation, testing, et cetera. It
But
says,
yes,
Oh,
so those, but just, if you look at it in order, it's order of what the town will do. So the first one says we're gonna extend the moratorium until the 19th, 2019 rather,
Yeah.
to give the community a chance to vote on it. The second one says, let's insert this bylaw that says prohibit everything related to it. And then you go
In
into
all
the cleanup
districts.
of all the other bylaws, so there's a change, there's zoning bylaws, then there's, a change to the general bylaws, which gives the authority to say, hey, you can't give a license, which we're gonna talk about in a second.
Yeah.
And then you have the marijuana overlay district, which says, let's not do that anymore. So that's just, look how, that the theme is NIMBYism, not in my backyard. That's the theme. Don't do it here. The town votes as a policy, don't do it here. That's what this is.
so 16, we're all set with 16.
I wish you could walk around with me all day, honestly. There'd be so many more things I would understand.
I think by the end of the day, you might regret that.
Be a long day, but
17,
Same.
17 is the
marijuana
overlay.
That's the district which, I don't think I've been. But
That includes number of licenses, it includes
right, and that's 20%
location, dimensional controls,
of the, of the.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
it's to be compliant with MGO.
correct.
Not to say it's permitted in the community, because we just abolished that in the first two, if we
Yes.
take action on that.
So the planning board may, when they get to something like the 9, say, no retail stores, but okay to grow. So that might be a motion that the planning board may make. We're gonna have
Where would
another-
they make that motion, like, back at,
Would that be on 15? With the zoning districts, or would that be,
Well, 50, well, see, it's interesting, and I apologize, you're asking me, but, so 15, yes, 16, yes, because there's a change to both the zoning bylaws and there's a change to the general bylaws. So it's a good way to button it up, right? It seems as though the policy of the community is to say no to all aspects of it. So there's a lot of, the only thing that's positive so far is the MOD, because at least you set up a definition of it, what it would ever be in case those other bylaws change. So if you were to do it, I mean, Rick would be the advice, or town council would say, you have to insert it into these.
Yeah, of course, the question is, I mean, the town voted to have this on a regular town election, and that's why Abington voted for it. Now, it seems a lot of people are saying, no, I don't want that in Abington, and it seems like more people are involved in it now that it's gonna happen, and it seems like there's more people that are against it than were for it before, but whatever. I just soon not say it. I'm just, I know I voted, but anyway.
I think in the end, town meeting will have its say.
Yes, yeah. I would think the town meeting would probably vote against it, and I think we'll have to go to the election. The thing is, I think we need regulations in hand if they do.
Well, as Dr. Tyler was saying, we need to be compliant with Mass General Law of this is where it would be if we do have it, and that type of thing, and that's what this is covering, I believe, and that's what 17 is covering, that's what.
Yeah, it's a 17.
yeah, because it's all of the.
18 is garage or storage space, we're taking
This
storage
is-
space out.
This is from the Board of Selectmen, and what they refer to here is new, which we don't have in the zoning regulations right now. Storage pod, that's all new stuff, and
What?
you might have the question, it's like Kleenex, you go to get Kleenex, but Kleenex is a brand name, and tissue is really what you buy. So I know that, to me, pod is what you see on TV and everything else. I know what they're talking about, but it's that's what that article is all about.
So it's to change it from reading or storage space in the bylaw.
Yeah, they're taking our storage space out. I don't think our bylaw actually talks about pods, but
I think actually, I see pod mentioned in the part that is not being changed. Part D. Yes.
Storage pod
But you can have
container.
it, but not for like too long.
It's just like,
Oh, no, actually, D is being added.
Yeah.
My mistake.
Yes, that you can have it, but not
So you can have it, but it
basically. not-
explains the size that you can have and the amount of time you can have it for.
Yeah.
like in your
In your-
driveway.
In your driveway,
In your driveway, so
essentially.
you can't basically just have one and live out of
Yeah,
it,
And have
I
it
got
for more than 3 months at a
which
time.
makes sense.
Yeah.
we changed it at the last meeting. That's in the new literature, 150 days following issue of a building permit, because, oh no, that's, I thought we didn't change it because it's from the Board of Selectmen and we can't, if it's a planning board article and we have the hearing and it's changed for one reason or another, we can change it then. But if it's from someone else, like the selectmen or someone, or by petition, we can't change it, we can make recommendations. One of the questions that they had on this was the fact that, you can't, if you put items from your house into the pod, and you haven't got occupancy of your house until the building inspector gives you occupancy. So you can't, you have to wait till you get occupancy, and then you can take it out of the pod and put it in your house.
Yeah.
And they really need more time than when they finish construction, so that's sort of up in the air. I'm not quite sure that'd be a problem in town, but. Any-
Further questions on 18? 19, minimum lot width, continuous lot frontage, adding dimensional and destiny chart,
That,
changing it from 100 feet to 125 feet.
yeah, that's just to give you more frontage to do something with. It's 25 foot wider than 100 foot space.
Was it, were we finding that that wasn't enough? Is
They thought that the 100 feet was a little bit too small, and so that's why they went to 125. It's been 100 feet for many years. We've had problems with, have you seen around town where they stop putting condominiums in sideways and tearing down houses and all that other kind of stuff, so.
Yes, the question.
And it's only a highway commercial district.
Oh, okay.
And so that would be impacted by the Route 18 widening as well, potentially.
No, because it's frontage, it's
Okay.
not depth, yeah. And one of the other things we passed, talking about things we do with the widening of Route 18, we passed a bylaw a year or so ago for the fact that if someone is non-conforming, they can still maintain the dwelling there, for instance, they theoretically,
Essentially being grandfathered in.
even though it's been changed.
Article 20, which is section H, using chart found in zoning bylaws to insert the
been
word
withdrawn.
registered.
I think.
Do we know about that?
That's, no, that's not. I put that in the wrong one. This is
Never mind.
Adding-
this is registered, we've eliminated the fact that you can put trucks and trailers that aren't registered as storage, so they have to be registered now.
Any questions there? I have to make sure. 21,
21, as it sits right now, the zoning board of appeals sees all the cases, not just 1 and 2 family homes, but even when it comes to other subdivisions and so forth. So it's the feeling of the planning board to leave the 1 and 2 family, which is the ZBA controls as it is. But the planning board has an engineer, and we review anything that's more than that. And we've been doing it for years. But in addition, after we approve it, they still have to go before the zoning board of appeals and get the same situation. So the public needs to go to both meetings, and we're both doing the same job. And
So
we
it's
have to do
redundant
it.
work at this point.
Yeah,
And so what specifically does 21 change it to?
What it changes is that presently they have to go before planning and ZBA.
And with this,
And with this,
No,
they will just go
only-
before ZBA with 1 and 2 family homes, which they still will do, because it doesn't come before the planning board. And the planning board that handles all these others anyway, they just have to come to one board rather than 2. It's costly to everybody, and the public goes to both meetings too. So that's the reason that's been in there. It's been
It makes it more cumbersome for
Yes, it makes it a lot less
For the-
cumbersome for developers or people who want to.
build and,
Yeah. And there again, it's too bad, but the zoning board of appeals doesn't have engineers sitting on the board or anything like that anyway, so.
Sean?
Sake of pure academic discussion, does the 2-board process, aside from being cumbersome, cantankerous, and otherwise crazy, does it serve the value to any party, given 2 separate sets of ears and voices, where one could sway one way, one could go the other, whereby creating a check in the balance?
Well, that could always be said about anything, but I've yet to see anything change, from the planning board.
That's perfect, that's the best answer.
That was
I
my
have yet
next
to see it in my
question, was
experience.
how often is there a change between what the two, or a vote in different ways between the 2 boards? So if it's not, then that makes a lot of sense. 22, we're striking and enclosed within exterior walls or firewalls.
That's from the,
Building.
yeah, that's from the building inspector, and the reason for that was, I guess, people were able to put carports in and not have to go before the building inspector.
Questions there?
And the next one is just excluding pools, because I guess there's some problems with the, a pool near our house, and the building inspector wants that changed.
For 23, I'm trying to just figure out exactly what
I think that's gonna be
what the
voted.
effect of that change
Planning board's
is.
gonna vote to pass over that. And they're also voting to pass over 25 also. And the reason for it was, we had town council there, and there were problems more with town council on 25.
No closer than 10 feet from the side or rear lot line of
Oh, I-
principal building.
Can I interrupt myself?
You can.
I didn't know I had it in me, but that's where the marijuana area is, if you can see it from there. What, for the.
At the top,
That's
where the
zone,
X's
where
are.
yeah.
Right there, was it, Sorrells is down here near this road.
If you want to hold it up over your head to the camera.
Supposedly-
Sure they can make out a lot of detail on that.
Supposedly we're gonna have let me just see if I can find this.
So essentially, getting back to Article 23, essentially what the change is saying is that pools will not be considered an accessory building attached to a primary building.
Yeah, 23 is the one, yeah.
If they're gonna pass over it though. then-
Yeah.
No, the 23, it's gonna be fine. Let me just make sure I got my notes. This meeting, we're like you, we'll get over 11:30.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
These weren't in the,
No.
like 3 months ago, right? So
Correct.
it looked a lot different, you know.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't have the details on these yet. And that's why Wayne's here tonight.
Yeah.
And Passover, since I'm new, that just means they're gonna ignore
That
it.
They'll
means,
take no action on it.
it
Okay.
means that they
Skip it.
say no, basically.
We just like sit there, okay?
Yes.
Great holiday.
So essentially, when we are making our recommendations, the things that we can do with our recommendations are we can recommend to approve,
Uh-huh.
to pass over, which is essentially not approving,
Okay.
or to defer to like the planning board or someone else
Okay.
who petitioned it. But pass over is generally the opposite of approve.
Okay.
So
So it's like
So it
no,
means
but
no.
it doesn't, like,
it means no without saying no.
means
Well, it's
no
not
with
really-
being nice. No, I'm just
Not really. It's just you're not.
letting,
You're
yeah,
not even,
letting everyone down
you're not even
easy.
hearing it.
We're letting them
just-
down easy.
For some reason, it's either been taken care of.
Okay.
Or it's been added into another article, or they realize they don't need it because it already exists, and so there's no sense to have any, like,
Discussion.
or debate over it.
And were you able to confirm that that is one of the Passover articles? for
Which one are we on now?
23.
23? 23 is okay, excluding pools. That's fine.
It just simply
Okay.
means the pool's not to be part of your primary dwelling. That's all that really
What was
means.
that?
They're not gonna consider a pool part of your
yes.
house.
Which makes
Right.
sense.
That's all that means.
It's not really part of your house.
And 24 is,
If you have a boathouse.
Huh?
What if you have a boathouse?
I'll never be having that.
It's the next
we
point.
had, I'll tell you quite frankly,
No
we
driveway
had
shall be closer than 50 feet.
people that wanted to have the building inspector there and at the meeting, and I think that caused some of the confusion. We hadn't been able to do that.
So it's how close your driveways can be.
So it
your
looks
driveway
like,
can be.
it looks like the wording change is replacing variable by the planning board to waiver by the planning board. So I think that looks, is that just a wording change,
That's all
legality?
it is. yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
questions there?
Just a point of clarification, it's actually more than a wording change,
Yeah, it's
because variable
number of
means at the
feet.
discretion of the planning board. Waiver means it's up to you to say, please do this for me. And I have to give you a compelling case as to why, and they have to waive that and say, yes, we'll waive it. The net effect is the net effect is the net
That's the one,
effect.
there's no driveways.
Yes, sir.
That one was
Yes.
unanimously passed over.
24
deal.
passed over.
175, 475.
25 is another swimming pool article.
And that one, I think we,
Adding to the definitions, the word usage swimming pool, and including the definition to say any structure intended for swimming or recreational bathing that contains water over 24 inches deep. This includes in-ground, above-ground, and on-ground swimming pools, hot tubs, and spas. So that would go in conjunction with Article 23 to define that, which is defining that the things that are defined in this article are not considered part of your house if they're outside structures, essentially.
that one,
Just as a point of clarification, I don't think the two are related.
25 was,
No.
was voted to
I-
pass over.
Oh, good. Good, we don't have to talk about it. You buy a kiddie pool and it's 24
That's what I was
24 inches.
thinking.
You couldn't have one unless you had permission.
Town council couldn't.
You couldn't even buy a
I was
discretionary.
gonna say, 24 inches is not very tall.
Not very deep, yeah, right.
Yeah, not very deep.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
So we're not-
the
that's
Walmart
over.
blow-up pools, I think, are deeper than that, so I
I think
need a
that's the
permit.
problem.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
like problems with those bigger ones now.
Yeah.
That the like self-inflating or whatever the
I
heck
guess
they
we
are.
can still have those, 'cause we're
that-
passing over.
Yeah.
Article 26 is the Water Commissioner's zoning map.
And that we voted on, it's from the water commissioners, and the reason for that has a lot to do with the Myers well. And before, you really can't see from this distance, but that's where the pond is, and it goes across. Before, it was more of a circle area that went to Route 123, almost hit the center of town. And I think it has to do, they actually did a survey, and that's the area, so it comes all the way up into the pond behind the junior high school or the old Eagle Brook School. And I'm gonna pass that around, but that's the area, and that, I mean, part of that's in Whitman.
So essentially, this is just
It's
changing.
They're engineers, and it's to do with the Myers well and the recharge area for the Myers well. And that's, it's really
Essentially,
for the water commissioners, but
It's just, it's
The
just,
final map will have, Lauren will have copies of the map for the final warrant proposed. We're looking for the final color map.
Does it like do anything specifically? Like if there's a house there or something, does it change anything?
I think it's just a map.
And,
I think it's just a map.
Just a map.
Changes the boundaries.
Okay. Any further questions there?
Well, I think that's
On the
Greg
map.
asked an important question, though.
Yeah.
So what does the actual impact of, I know it has to do with the recharge of the well,
Boundaries of
but
that zone.
specifically what's to do to the homeowners in that area by increasing the boundaries of the watershed protection overlay district?
the water, I mean, you really need to talk to the water people, but it's my understanding it had something to do, we were trying to get a grant for the Myers well, and I think that had something to do with it either.
Oh, maybe like where the boundaries are, the
I
grant
think
reads a
it's-
certain way.
The recharge area and whether or not they get there, I don't know whether
Okay.
they didn't figure it was actually drawn, hydraulic, can't say the word tonight, but hydrologically as compared with, it was just an arbitrary line before.
I see.
'27. Signs.
That's,
So this
that's,
is,
that's all of
this is all from the sign
that's
committee.
The sign
The one
committee?
thing that we may make planning board may make a recommendation. That we have internally with signs, and Rick Collins was on that committee, he thought that they had changed that, but it wasn't
So I think,
actual regulation.
without digging into every single detail of this one, I think the overall question from this committee would be, what, if any, is the financial impact to the town on these, of these changes?
I suppose the only impact could be, everybody gets taxed on their signs, so
Because
perhaps if the signs
more
were
money.
smaller, you probably wouldn't get as much tax, but
I know when, I think it was possibly last year when we had the building commissioner in here, one of the things you mentioned was that we weren't enforcing the laws and we weren't necessarily collecting on all of the signs that we should
Yeah, well, I
have been
think
at
it's
the
oh,
time,
well,
so.
that you go to one business and they say, but the guy down the street's got the,
Yes.
and then he says, but the guy across the street's got the,
Yes.
so, how do the businesses feel about this? That's, I mean, nobody's gonna leave town over it, right?
No, not at this point, but, I mean, there's no question that signs bring people into your store. You know, if you have a special and you put it out there, and the better the business does, the better it is. But sometimes, in fact, you know, Bob Soper is on our board, who was a building inspector for a number of years, and there was one store, I just did not mention the name, but I mean, there's signs all over it. And when we were doing this sign bylaw, I went around town and took pictures and brought it to the committee and said, hey, this is what exists. And one of the most flagrant violations of signs is on a place that Bob Soper brought and said, hey, this doesn't conform. And so he went to the zoning board of appeals, and he has all the signs up. So that's the way it is sometimes. But, and it's too bad, because there are ones, I mean, you really don't mind a sign out for a few weeks or something, if something's special or something, but when someone starts abusing it, then we have all these laws.
Kind of like the pod
Yeah, right.
one. You don't mind if somebody has it in there to store something for a temporary amount of time, but if someone has that for 12 years, it's going to be.
Or even the way it looks, like, right? Like,
Well, that's the eyesore
Yes.
kind
Even if
of
you-
aspect of
we
it.
don't
And
really-
that's and that's for the newer members. That's why we actually had the article. Was it 2 years ago where
2 years ago.
we created the sign committee, like the sign bylaw committee.
We had some
so.
changes being made, and at that time, they said, well, we won't do any of this, we're gonna have a sign committee look at it. So there were a lot of changes that went in there. And one of the things that you may hear is that, well, they actually took a sign bylaw from another town, which is more recent, and obviously is more up to date, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And the comment was made, that's been approved by the Attorney General's office. Well, everything in here is approved by the Attorney General's office
Yep.
already, because you can't put anything in there until you send it in there and they review it.
This is probably for the sign committee, but I'll ask you. It seems as though has it already been through council that there's a conflict, and I think I could drive a Mack truck through a particular loophole. It says, I understand the intent empirically. We've had really no recourse and no direct oversight, and folks have done some kooky stuff. We have a very historic community, want to maintain the characteristics, et cetera. Fully agree with that. So as I look at this particular bylaw, I'm drawn to the exemption. So on page 19 of the warrant that was given today, subsection G says removal of existing signs and abandoned signs. Specifically G2, the wording is excellent insofar as any existing non-conforming sign legally erected, right? That's supposed to close all loopholes. Now I jump to page 21, section C, and section C, mind you, of 17558, which is general regulations, which kind of supersedes everything. And it says, the provisions of this bylaw shall not apply to the following signs, and no sign permit shall be required for, 1, non-conforming signs which existed prior to the adoption of this bylaw. So you've just eradicated all opportunity to.
I have a problem with this. I brought it up to the board, and I said, you know, at least be responsible for the previous bylaw. So they're really saying that
Doesn't
even though
matter.
we had rules and regulations on the books.
Which is what I think the first one did,
Right.
and then this one undoes
Takes it
fully.
away.
Right.
So if the intent is to get control and to ensure that we maintain the character of the community and to allow enterprise to be enterprise, but within reason, then we create, again, I'm not speaking as a lawyer, but we create a tremendous Mack truck to drive through,
Well,
or a hole rather, drive a Mack truck through.
Yeah, I agree with you, because, you know, a lot of signs we put up without permits, and they've been there. So the answer from town council the other night was the fact that, well, if they weren't legally put there, then they would have to come down, but.
Not according to this bylaw.
But the way,
I think the
agree with
question would be, regardless of this bylaw, they may have to come down. So the part in Article C that you mentioned with the non-conforming signs which existed prior to the adoption of this, that says, the provisions of this bylaw shall not apply to the following signs. But if we are applying the bylaw that existed
But we're not. That's the
prior
point.
to this.
That's the point, you're not, because it says the permit requirements under 15757 which is what C is triggered under. Strike that, which is what G is triggered under. And we're not talking about a permit, we're talking about general provisions, so the general sense of this regulation is the following. These folks aren't required to follow this. And it says very specifically, existing non-conforming signs. It doesn't say legally. And if it said that, then we'd all be good, right? Because it would actually close that loop.
How much
But-
do we fine for sign violations? What's the fine?
That's to be determined by the,
Building inspector?
$1
Or Board of Selectmen?
$100 billion.
Exactly. Dr. Evil.
no, that was a point that I brought up from that. It's,
So can they strike it? Can they change it? Or, I mean,
hey, town, we went over this with town council. The only note that I have on ours was the internally, it seems like we didn't make a, and I had an old copy at the time, and they said I didn't have the most current copy.
To Wayne, I wonder though, is just as a point of order, right? So if a regulation is ambiguous, then the office overseeing that regulation has the rights to author sub-regulatory guidance to say, this is what we mean by this and how we're gonna enforce it. So maybe the planning board will just simply have that as an option to say,
Maybe
you know,
that's a, the pre-meeting before the pre-warrant meeting, right before the town meeting, that, with council, that might be a good time to address that.
So,
Or have them look at it and see how it's contradictory.
Any other questions?
So we still don't know though how much money we make off
Right.
of, not make, but what the,
What the
Yeah.
fees and permits are,
And if we enforce.
and what this change.
well, we don't
would-
enforce them, right?
If we were in theory
But
to
if we were
Yeah.
enforcing them, there is a fine, we just don't know how much.
and it-
It's up to
The
the,
sign committee.
no, up to the building inspector, right?
Right.
That decides how much of a fine. Is there like parameters?
the sizes and everything else that are.
No, I mean, is there, like, so, it's your first infraction and it's a small sign, so it's a $20 fine, or it's your, do you know?
And that would be.
I'd probably have to ask him.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure that it's such fines or anything.
so it would be the zoning board, the planning board, and the selectmen would all have their,
Zoning board does.
No, what, the.
sorry, planning board?
All the signs will now come under the zoning board of appeals, according to this bylaw. We used to have say over some of it, but, which was given to us like 2 years ago, and, then they want it back, so, enough to do. So
Sure.
they can do the whole thing, you know. And, but there is one other thing in here that, which is sort of, I'm not quite sure. It does refer to, refers to the planning board, with a new construction. But it really doesn't give us an authority to do anything. I mean, we always send out to all the other boards in town and ask them what their opinion is. Because if they object to something, then we say, well, you can't do it, you know.
Sure.
So they still, they would control all the signs, but there is, it's only 2 pages long, but if you think I'd find it.
Does anyone have any further questions on the signs regarding financial impact? All right.
The only thing is, we would probably put an amendment in, although Rick, who was on the committee, thought it was changed, that we may put amending language for a freestanding, internally illuminated sign. So that will probably come up on the floor. We
Okay.
haven't had it, we'll do that at the next meeting.
Article 28, moving on to that, looks to be changing the distance that buildings and parking areas can be from the property lines.
Page 29, Article 28.
So it's trimming down the distance,
What page?
29.
29.
Article 28.
Article 28, page 29. Coincidentally, Article
that-
29 starts on page 29, too. Nice symmetry there.
We actually had we've had some instances, we have a project on Chestnut Street that there's nothing around, I mean, 50 foot, in order to get business in a certain area, and that's what that is, to limit. In other words, you can't have a proposed parking area within 25 feet of a.
And you're gonna change it to 10?
Yeah.
No,
Does
it's a
that
building can't be, a building can now be with this, would now be able to be within 10 feet of a parking area, within 50 feet of the lot line or existing street line. And parking areas can be within 50 feet of an existing lot line or street.
Does this help with business or?
It does, it's, 100 feet is quite a good sized distance just to have
Yes.
open, And if we can get businesses to occupy.
And is this in all zones or specific?
175, 391, I think. I'd have to look at that.
My only comment would be, I mean, you're on the planning board, are there complaints about this for this to come up, or is this just somebody's idea that these numbers aren't good? Is it other towns have these numbers and they have better business statistics, or is it?
That was by petition. I think it was in order to get some businesses, and the Chestnut Street area, I know, was one of those.
And you could fit more in with these, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And 200 feet is a lot of feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can fit more houses in a subdivision.
That's why I'm wondering
Right.
that's why I'm wondering if it's specific zones, because I don't believe that you have to have your house be 200 feet
I know that's far.
from a lot line.
No, you don't.
So
I wonder if it's just.
that was why I
business.
was
But business
wondering about
200
the
from the
zone.
lot line is far.
Yes. And you don't want businesses stacked on top of each other.
No,
in the
but
town of
50
this
feet's
side, but-
pretty-
But 200 feet is a long way.
Yeah, and 50 is pretty good
And that's
size.
200 feet on either side, so it's really 400,
Yeah, so then the business has to occupy a lot of land.
so.
That's
Pay
what-
tax on that and yada yada, they're not gonna want to. And 50 feet's a good amount of
So,
space.
any further questions on this? 29. No, not yet.
Yeah, just cleaning up what was there before. You can see
So driveways. Other uses, this one, at least from my initial review, does not look overly financial in impact.
No.
Sean?
And just as a naive piece, if I own a townhome, or I'm a general contractor looking to build a townhome,
Yeah.
and I want to put 2 driveways in,
Right.
it's a 2-family home, am I reading this right where it says, unless otherwise authorized pursuant to a waiver by a majority of the planning board,
Right.
no more than 1 driveway shall be permitted on any street frontage?
We'd have to get one
So
of
they
those.
would have to petition for a waiver.
just a point of clarification for me further, just a comment, I guess. It's almost like you'd want to see which shall not be unreasonably withheld.
Shall not be withheld for vindictive personal reasons. Anyone with further questions there? Article 30. Revising the portions of the column entitled MUPDD, Multiple Use Plan Development District. Changing where quite a few things are allowed.
Can you, sorry, go back to 31A at the bottom?
We're on 30.
We're on 30.
Do you mean page 31?
Yeah, sorry, page 31. A at the bottom. It's just, it's another one of those things that sort of goes towards people who have old cars, classic.
I
No
think,
vehicles in any type in operable condition, well, that should be
I
parked,
think A is not being changed.
not being changed.
That's what's in the original.
Yep,
Yeah, the
that's what's in there already.
On the changes.
So you're already breaking
So if you flip over, B is being changed, A is not.
on the bottom of page 31.
Ah,
Because it
Oh,
was
okay.
something to bring it up.
Greg, just as a hypothetical example from maybe a way back time, there may have been a member of this group that had asked somebody about a hypothetical about permits and building and years past, and so just when you read that and you're like, oh, no kidding, that already exists there. If I'm doing my own old car stuff, we got to figure that out. But Miss Daisy might be able to offer some feedback on that.
Thank you.
Not always good to ask a hypothetical question.
Do you have a rundown of what the specific differences on the table for Article 30 are? I know they're in bold there for us to be able to see, but I'm not sure all, especially the newer people, know what the difference between SP and Y.
Okay, yeah, SP is a special permit, and that means that you can go to the zoning board of appeals and ask them if they can do that, and it's just a decision that they can arbitrarily make. Probably the wrong word. If it's an N, then they need to have a hardship and a real strong reason. In some towns, when it's an N, it means no. In other towns, they will consider it, and 3 people make that decision whether or not to, if they can prove a hardship. On yes, it means it's automatically acceptable. They have to go before the zoning board of appeals.
So
that-
essentially, from what I'm looking at, there are several more things that we're making it easier for them to get
Right. In
permits.
other words, the special permit, they have to go before the zoning board of appeals. The why, they do not have to.
From what I'm seeing, looking through the changes, none of the changes are making anything no. Some of them are changed from no to special permit, some from no to yes, and some from special permit to yes.
And this district is mostly on Chestnut Street. There's also some of this, which is actually on our rules, on our zoning, is that where the base is? But that would not include that, because that's been changed by the base, and then there's a whole another procedure that they want to change the zoning on the base.
Now we're on Chestnut Street, like where all the woods is.
This is in an area that has a tremendous amount of ledge.
It's like all woods there,
Must
right?
be
It's all woods
Chestnut,
there.
Chestnut Street
It's-
past Hancock towards the border of town.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's on the right-hand side as you leave town. The left-hand side is mostly all Ames.
Okay, so the right-hand side, there's nothing there now, so this would be to develop something
Right,
there.
there's an old
Okay.
house up there, there's one project that we have in front of us right now that probably won't even see from the road because it has to go in a ways and then, but it's for some of this type of thing. You know, I think we really, and that's the reason we're changing it, is I think we really had a district that really didn't allow for anything to go in there. And one of the things that has happened up there, as you can see, as you first start out, that was all this district, and they asked for zoning to change it to put residences in there, because basically there's nothing else that could really go in there, so that's why you see some residences on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Questions there, anyone? Article 31.
And this is a technology business zone that's, was done originally, when we had the, recall, but they had a recall on, Board of Health, this is a number of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
They rezoned it so they wouldn't have the, transfer station up there. And so it's put in the technology business zone, and the problem with it is we just haven't anything up there. We'd certainly like to see some industry go in there.
Which zone is this?
That's up on Route 18, probably in the area of Anderson Pierce and the FedEx building and all of the land. And it goes all the way over to the movie theater.
To 58, right? Like over where,
So like behind
Coal
Mary-
Tower is,
Right.
like,
not-
not
not
that,
on
but
side, on the
further
other
up on the
side.
So
other
like
side.
behind Mary Lou's
Yeah,
on 18.
yeah,
Okay.
behind the ale house, right? Kind of
Oh,
goes
so it
back
goes all
into
the way back
that.
there, okay.
That goes all the way back to Route
And there's like a bunch
58.
of like just nothing between like
Yeah.
that Mary Lou's and an ale house. It's kind of like a nice. Honestly, it'd be nicer to have
Yeah.
like there's like the random CrossFit building and then there's just nothing.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
like the buses.
the buses and like that like random like ninja place or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a
It's
few more
Halloween thing
things
or
there.
something.
It's
That's a good place. I mean, it's
Yes.
like right on 18.
airsoft, yeah.
Air stuff, yeah. It'd be nice.
Started
to
out
have
as a
them.
ninja.
And then that goes
place.
all
Right, it
the way
was a
back
Ninja
to
Warrior
58.
place. It was
Or Wipeout,
Wipeout. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that ran into all kinds of injury issues and.
That would be nice.
So,
I mean,
does
location.
anyone have questions for Wayne for that one? I think that is the last of them, at least according to the
Sean had a
handout.
question.
Sean?
Just a general comment, looking through the things that are being allowed, for the most part, it seems very progressive, but what strikes me is, not that I'm an advocate thereof, but you can do everything else in those areas, except you can't get a tattoo there. That just seems really weird to me, that we would point specific, keep that.
It might be
Originally-
because, it might be because there's already a tattoo place there.
There's two.
I don't know, but there is one.
There already is a few in
If we're
town.
talking about that same area,
Sure, then I guess the whole notion of kind of free trade and capitalism
He
and
means in here
competition.
though.
I get what you're
It's-
saying.
It just says no. If we made so many updates and
Yep.
moved a lot of things from N to a Y, then why would we do that?
You know, it's funny that you bring that up, because there again, with zoning, we made it so that when tattoo parlors first came into town, we tried to make sure there wasn't any tattoo parlors in town, quite frankly, because there was a lot of objections to it. People didn't want tattoos, it was bad news, so to speak. So it was only allowed in, I've forgotten what area it was.
There's two of them. Isn't there one right
Highway commercial
downtown?
industrial, right on
And right
58,
in
right where
Pizzing's.
Martin's, right across the
Yeah.
street from Martin's.
Well, what happened?
And there's one at
Yeah, I think
Pizzing's,
it was-
too.
That was one place that was legal.
Yeah.
But then they continually went before the zoning board of appeals,
Yeah.
and the zoning board of appeals let them put them in the highway commercial, and the zoning board of appeals came back to us and said, look, we don't want to keep, we want you to put tattoo parlors in that district, so we don't have to keep giving them variances for it. So it came up at town meeting and we voted it, now you can have tattoo parlors in more than one section of town. So.
Things changing all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's
but
acceptable?
just not this section.
Right, and no,
Right.
evidently, it's probably something we didn't really, when we were looking at it, we didn't look at it. You make a good point. It's really funny
You
how.
also can't have adult entertainment.
Well, anyway, you couldn't, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, no, we
He didn't,
we
he
down
didn't
for
comment
adult
on that one,
entertainment,
so.
but you try to make it so, but you can't totally.
Yeah,
Let's put it all in.
Out of town, because then they can have it anywhere in town, you know.
right. You gotta be,
So, any other questions for Wayne before we mercifully let him leave?
I think you've been, honestly, you're a bastion of information because you have such years of experience.
Absolutely.
And these are never
Definitely
easy to go
appreciate you.
through.
No.
come in and explain to us.
You pay more attention, I go back over these things again.
I love the idea of using a graduate student.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I like that,
I do too,
that's
because,
a-
you know, despite the fact, I mean, sometimes you come up with some unique, different.
well, and you've got
ideas.
people that have just been listening to all of it recently, so that they're very fresh.
Right.
Whereas, you know, after we do something for a while, kinda.
And I like the idea about saving $140,000.
Well, I love the idea of saving.
Fin-
Well,
the
that's
finance
also probably
committee is
honestly more
highly
than
in
one
favor of
person
that
looking
as
at
well.
it. So
Right.
they're all gonna
Get a
have different
couple of
ideas
eyes,
as
yeah.
opposed to just one person doing
It's a
it. There's
great
probably gonna be
idea.
like 3 of them working on it
Right.
and the professors, so they can like all different perspectives, which is good.
Just the last commentary on the going through the bylaws. Living on the other end of Birch Street a number of years back, it was much to my chagrin going to one of my first town meetings after moving here. And it was when my neighborhood that I chose to live in was being rezoned. And there was a member of the community that said, geez, there's a house that's right next to you, Morris Caplis' house, that instead of actually putting up residential, we could put a Pizza Hut or a mortuary with apartments on top if we wanted to. And I said, I will be damned if I'm not fastidious to ensure that everyone understands the impact of these changes, because it does change the nature and characteristics of your neighborhood. And there are people who make choices to live where they live, and just because people are either pursuing a dollar or there could be some other contractual or contractor vantage point, I think there's a lot of changes that do impact you, whether you see it today or don't see it today. So, and there's a lot of words, and it's, you know, I think as many flipping questions as you possibly can, because it was a very uncomfortable piece. Fortunately, I mean, it is what it is. That end of Birch Street did wind up changing, but it was, people were, my opinion was people were asleep at the wheel, because it impacted the community that pays the tax dollars that supports those. So that's half the reason for my inquiries into them.
I mean, it's one thing when you live next to an airport and you're complaining about the
Right.
sound, but it's another thing when they build an airport. It wasn't.
Yeah,
Where it wasn't zoned,
true.
so. Wayne, thank you very much for your time. It's before my time.
Yeah, it was,
I don't know. So, with that, we're moving on to any discussion for articles outside of the Planning and Zoning Board and petitions that we just went over, which includes the budget. If we do have our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Felicia Moschella, here, our town accountant and our town manager. So we wanted to make sure that we had proper resources here if people had further questions, especially about in regards to full-day kindergarten, as that has been the biggest item that we've been discussing relative to this year's budget.
I actually did have a couple of questions on full-day kindergarten.
Felicia, do you want to come up? Thanks.
I will make this quick.
No, it's okay.
My
I think
first
that was
question.
for us.
my first question is, we're still looking at an opt-out program.
I didn't catch
And we're still looking at an opt-out program, so you're not, if we do go to full-day kindergarten, you don't have to use it. So that kind of leads into my next question is, how does that affect our numbers as far as with the Chapter 70 and money that we're planning on coming back? If more people opt out than we're planning on, do they just count as being there even if they're not there? You know what I'm saying? Like,
So-
is a body a body?
And just to add on to that, one of the questions that we had last week that fairly or unfairly we were told you probably had the information for, was generally how close to the threshold for Chapter 70 for the bump up in funds are we as far as total number of students?
Sure. So I can answer the first question, and I can tell you as of today, we have 121 students that are registered for all-day kindergarten next year, and 13 for half-day kindergarten. So I would surmise that regardless of whether we had an opt-out, if we were to have an opt-out program, which we said we would, the number would be very small and would be insignificant in terms of the Chapter 70 formula. In terms of whether a body is a body, it is. We don't have a half-day, we wouldn't have an official half-day program anymore, an all-day kindergarten program. Those students would choose to come for half the day.
So they'd still be counted
Yep.
towards the Chapter 70 number.
So in terms of the Chapter 70, that's a great question.
Actually, I have a question. So the
Yeah.
13 students not signed up for full-day kindergarten, they're not opting out of it, they're just not signed up because financial reasons or whatever, most likely financial
From the
implications.
information that we have had, it's financial.
It's money, yeah,
Yep.
okay. So chances are, if it was free, those 13 students would most likely then go to school
Correct.
with the rest of it. Otherwise, they would have to leave by themselves and miss out on half the day.
Correct.
So they're gonna miss half the education that all the other kids, all 121 kids get, and these poor 13 kids don't. And then we have to bus them.
Yes, yes. So.
So that's an
again,
extra
I think
cost,
that
correct?
That number would be.
Right, but I mean, right now, as of right now, we'd have to pay for a midday bus to bus them home.
Yeah,
Whereas if it was full day, then we'd at least not have to bus them, right?
yes.
Okay.
Well, we have the buses
So,
run during the day. though.
I think, let me just spend
Yeah.
a second on that. So, historically, we get a bump in that number. Once school starts, it will most likely be in the 30s. So each classroom would have 18 to 20 students in half-day kindergarten. Those students typically register for school late. The families don't have the resources to pay for full-day kindergarten and haven't had previous school experiences. So those students are already behind.
Right.
But behind
Yes.
the other typically
Absolutely.
developing students. That's not to say that their families don't value education or don't believe that they want their child to be in full-day kindergarten. They
They can't afford it.
can't afford it.
And they don't qualify for a grant because they don't make not too little of money.
And all,
Or something, like assistance, you know what I mean? Like,
and full-day kindergarten is a tuition-based program.
Right.
It's not need-based.
Yeah.
So there aren't, if you can qualify for free and reduced lunch, you can qualify
but you can't
for-
qualify for that.
Correct. So if there are students families that choose to opt out, my belief is it will be a very small.
We go over that number again, because I heard you say 18 to 20 students per classroom.
So we're in usually the mid-30s for half-day kindergarten. Right now, we're at 13.
Mid-30 of students, I think.
Right, so you weren't saying that 18 to 20 students of a classroom would choose to be
No,
half-day?
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm saying that between now and the first week of school, we'll typically get an additional 17 to 20 students that would
choose
be in
half-day.
half-day kindergarten.
For
Or
a
maybe
total
not be-
number of,
For a total number
Total
of
per
in the
class.
mid-30s
Yep.
on average of half-day
out
kindergarten.
of,
Thank you.
100 some,
150.
yeah.
Yes.
that's
That's
right.
okay.
In terms of the threshold of where we are, we talked about last time that the reason that we're getting this Chapter 70 bump in FY '20 is the combination of the increase in students enrollment in grades 1 through 12 that we saw this year. We anticipate something similar next year. So an increase, we had over 100 students increase this year in our enrollment. We'll see an increase next year. We're already estimating an increase based on preschool and kindergarten coming in, plus the other half of those kindergarten kids. So we get half a student chart, we get the Chapter 70 funding for half a student. Once you go to full day kindergarten without tuition, you get it for a full student.
Sean?
Because of your expertise, this is just the foundation funding question. It lags a year behind, right?
Correct.
So it's October of the previous year. So as an example for us now, if it's October of 18 is going to be part of FY 20's.
Correct. Yes.
Which is why you need the seed money, if you will,
Right.
for the first year of the program. The second year of the program, you'll receive that money as part of the Chapter 70 funding.
One of the questions last week, Felicia, was, do we know, and this wouldn't even be your thing to know, but do you?
Bring it on.
I'm just gonna ask anyway.
Yep.
In other communities that have added full-day kindergarten, is the home values, do you know if they find an increase in their home values or some aspect like that? We were discussing that. Did anyone get an answer for that
I
from?
didn't ask.
I don't have direct data on that, but I do know that a community that funds full-day kindergarten, there's a value to that in the community. There's a value to that in the school system. I know when, those are some of the questions people ask when they're looking to move into a community. Those are some of the questions I do know that people ask about, when people talk about what the school system's like. Do you have full day, no tuition, full day kindergarten? Those are the kinds of questions that people do ask, which I think does in turn impact home values and community values.
And I will say, one of the things, at the point that we were discussing that, we had a little bit of confusion over the number of communities that did and did not have
Full-day kindergarten.
full-day tuition-free kindergarten, and we were at the time asking that under the assumption that it was a smaller number of communities having it rather than the larger number of communities. So I think, personally, looking back at the discussion, I think with the larger number of communities having it, it's harder to judge that because there are less communities adopting it at that point, at this time. So.
Oh, malarkey, Mr. Chairman.
Malarkey.
Because it was adopted over the last 6 years, how many communities adopted full-day kindergarten? And I
So
think
that's
there's a
the question, is
there's
how
a,
many?
I surrendered it, so just, if I may, well, because nobody did the analysis. So we could beat this particular horse.
Well, because we knew that you had someone
There's
analyzing.
over 80% of communities in Massachusetts
Yes.
have full-day kindergarten tuition.
We just didn't know if that was something that maybe, we know that you had done an in-depth study, and we didn't know if maybe if that was any information that might have been included about the increase in home values. And we're gonna suggest that that would be a great thing to add in there.
I'm guessing that, I'll look into it.
It's just a good, thing to know.
Especially for people who don't have children
Yeah,
that are
that's-
going to be in kindergarten. I do, so it's different, but for my mom or something, it might not really care.
Although back on the home thing, I think, wasn't that article saying that most of the communities on the South Shore don't have free full-day kindergarten? So if like you're looking between this town and another town
I think it was not most, but it was that the South Shore has a higher percentage than
that
most
don't
other
have
towns in the state.
free full-day kindergarten. So if you were looking between two towns and we now offer free full-day, more people will be like, oh, you know what, maybe I'll move to Abington, I'll give those school system a try, and then there's more demand,
Yeah, like we look like the better deal.
Right, exactly, because, oh, yeah, I don't have to pay for this or whatever. So, I mean, there's probably, again, no actual data on that, but I would assume that would be appealing.
Mike, did you have another question? I think you said you had a couple.
Well, that was just,
The two
if it was gonna have the opt-out, and how does that affect the numbers?
Do we have other questions for Felicia?
A general comment?
Yep.
I had the benefit of speaking with the superintendent, who I feel as though was remarkably tenacious in trying to gain contact with me. Absent skywriting and carrier pigeons, every other means was used. Yeah, oh yeah. It was a positive conversation, and it didn't necessarily persuade or dissuade me in any one particular direction. But the candor really came down to is equal access for all students to be given the same educational values and opportunities. Again, notwithstanding pedagogy, just simply that's the core basis of it. I'm not putting words into Peter's mouth, but that's how I took the conversation.
That's exactly what it is, and that's those students that are, majority of those students that are in half-day kindergarten, it's because of the financial reasons.
And they typically didn't like go to preschool either for
Many of them did
financial.
not.
So then this is like their first opportunity at school at age 5, 6, depending on the cutoff, where their birthday is.
I can tell you
Yeah.
my experience this beginning of this year, being in the kindergarten classrooms, and the noticeable difference in the students that were in that. Not all of them.
No, of course
I don't
not.
want to paint a broad brush, but in the half-day programs, the lack of educational readiness, that's the best way to put it, versus those that were in the full day, had other educational experiences, knew how to hold a pair of scissors, knew how to sit in a chair, knew how to hold a pencil, and other students had never had those experiences. And that's the equal access.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Even just the interaction.
the social. I mean, yeah. I mean,
If you're 5 years old and you've never been into a classroom or a bus,
you don't understand rules, how to get in line. Yeah, yeah, that's.
Any other questions? Anyone?
I want to thank you and thank you for your very thoughtful questions, not just tonight, last time we were here, the email, we want to get that information out. We really appreciate the thoughtfulness.
And we want to thank you for coming. We know we've dragged you in here a couple of times, so.
After a long day already, I'm sure.
Yes.
thank you.
Appreciate
All right,
it.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the rest of our agenda is to go through and give our recommendations on the articles for both the special and annual town meeting. I think at this point, given the hour, it would be wise to take a 5 or 10 minute break before we do that. Do we need to vote on a break?
No,
Do I
you can just break.
do I stop the recording?
Yes, you could.
So, all right, I will stop the recording. We will take a 10 minute break and come back for our recommendations.